Right, so we'll start. Good morning, morning everybody. Some names are familiar. I can see some familiar faces in the room already. If I could just ask you to keep your microphones on mute this morning. Please do share your information in the chat box and ask questions as we go along. Very excited today. This event was originally planned for probably nearly a year ago now, and it would have been over lunch with a nice glass of wine in hand. Unfortunately, plans had to change, but just a bit of background, I first came across Connected Kerb via the wonderful medium of LinkedIn, which immediately piqued my interest because I've always been a bit of a green geek, for want of a better word, and have seriously considered an electric vehicle myself. Unfortunately, there's nowhere for me to charge an electric vehicle, either at home or indeed in our office. So this is something that I wanted to kind of explore today, and I know Connected Kerb are very keen on lobbying for more charging points, and they'll talk about that a bit further. But I suppose it's really about encouraging you guys as business leaders to consider what you can do either in your office space or, you know, for supporting your employees to change. And again, I can see one of our lovely property people, those in the property arena in the room. Will it be a consideration for future for, you know, new home builds, whether that is, you know, an integral part of the building? As I said, please do use the chat box to introduce yourself and ask any questions. We will be recording the session, but you are able to speak freely. This will be up on our library probably towards the end of the week, and I will share the link with you so that you can send it, you know, share it with your colleagues and indeed clients. I will also be sharing the guest list this afternoon, hopefully, or tomorrow morning, and I'll be including a short survey which Connected Kerb have asked me to put together, and I'll share the outcome from that directly with them. So without further ado, because you've probably heard enough of me this morning, I'm going to hand over to our first esteemed speaker, Mr. Martin Offiah. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Sarah. John, if you could put my first slide up. I think that's the second slide. Yeah, here we go. No, just keep the first slide up. Thank you. I'm sure there's going to be some technical issues there. But anyway, my name's Martin Offiah, MBE, as you can see from there, and I am the brand ambassador at Connected Kerb. I've been involved with Connected Kerb for just over 2 years now. I think myself and our CEO, Chris Pateman-Jones, who you'll be listening to a little bit later on, both joined the company at the same time. And we have both seen the company come on leaps and bounds and have been really enjoying the journey. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about Connected Kerb, a little bit about my journey from Wigan Warrior, should I say, to Eco Warrior. As you can see me playing in my heyday there. In my Wigan kit. I was a professional rugby player for 15 years, but it seems like a different lifetime now because I have been retired longer than I actually played. So I always think if anyone remembers you and you've been retired longer than than you actually played, then you must have established some kind of emotional connection. And I'm very big on connecting with people emotionally, connecting with people authentically, and I think that's what gravitated me towards Connected Kerb and their solution and what they're doing. So I'll just start off by sharing a little bit of my story. That's a cue to the next screen there, John. As we can see there, my lovely EVs that I own. One's my wife's car and one is mine. So how do I become involved in the EV sector? Well, it was about, I obviously was thinking about electric vehicles for a number of years now, and always thought, oh, this is something that's quite good, didn't know much about them. Obviously had some negative maybe thoughts from, things I'd seen in the press, Sinclair C5 and whatnot. And obviously I'm of that age when the milk floats were about. So that's what I thought electric vehicles were. It wasn't until I had a lift in an i3 in 2016. Again, we'll see it's an emotional connection. A good friend of mine, a guy called Andy Gomersall, gave me a drive in an i3 at the Cheltenham Festival. And I thought to myself, wow, this is exciting. Anyone who's been in an EV knows about the extreme torque and how fun they are to be in. So it got me thinking that, you know, maybe I could get an electric vehicle. Fast forward 12 months, my wife unfortunately had an accident in her car, no fault of hers, I might add, and the opportunity arose for us to get an electric vehicle. As you can see from the first picture, I have a driveway, so I'm part of the population who are fortunate enough to be able to get the government grant and and place their own driveway. When I bought my house, I was very big on having a driveway, but not for electric vehicles. As you can see from in the background, I'm keen on sports, so I had a basketball hoop installed. So I always knew that when I got a house in London, I always wanted one with a driveway to be able to play basketball. But thankfully, it also meant I could get a charger installed. Drove that car. I was driving a gas guzzler at the time and a Range Rover. And then I always used to use my wife's car because, you know, it was great to drive around, and, you know, it only cost about £2.50, I think, on my electricity bill every time I charged it up, whereby my Range Rover was costing me £100 to fill it up. So and my wife was getting upset with me because I was always taking the car. She was phoning me up saying, "Where's my car?" So I thought, you know, I'm going to get my own electric vehicle. So I thought to myself, I'll look round, and you know, we had one bad experience driving to Bath, which is only 10 miles beyond the range of the i3, and, you know, no charging stations, having to drive when it was cold because we didn't want to burn, you know, too much of the battery power, get into chargers and just praying that they were working. You know, it was just a really bad experience. But I didn't realize at the time I was learning so many things, just again, because of having this emotional connections, whether it's negative or it's positive, I was still learning. And so I went to look out and investigated Teslas. There was a barrier to entry, because even though I've been quite successful, still buying a Tesla was, you know, quite a stretch. So I decided to, you know, investigate, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And I, you know, managed to get hold of a used Tesla, and then worked out, did my sums. And if I kept it for 9 years, I knew that that Tesla would literally pay for itself and what I saved in, you know, it comes with a free charger and superchargers, and it was great. And you know, things got better. I found that there was a charger at the gym. They installed a charger at the gym. I've got 3 superchargers around me. They're extended the network. So I literally had that eureka moment that I thought to myself that you know, the cost of cars can be a barrier to entry, but you know what? Infrastructure is key. I think that's a cue there, John, to move on to the next screen. And yes, I thought to myself, wow, you know, if everyone had the same ease and convenience as I have, I've got a driveway, I've got a charger at the gym, I've got chargers around me, it would be a no-brainer. And if I don't know if it was divine intervention or what, or if it was just the fact that I was open to things, you know, certain things were happening in my life that I felt to myself that I needed to get on and have new passions. And I thought that I needed to do things. And, you know, I was passionate about EV. I was, you know, going online. I found myself tuning into Fully Charged and Llewellyn Bowen, that some of you may know him. And just at that time, you know, I was putting a lot of stuff out on social media. So I was, you know, I was living it. You know, people were seeing it. And just at that time, a friend of mine, Richard Clements, who's one of the founders at Connected Kerb, and I think is also the person who got our CEO, Chris Pateman-Jones, involved in the company, said to me, "Martin, you know, you're passionate, you know about success, you've got contacts, why don't you come on board and, you know, work with us?" And, you know, because obviously when I was out, Richard, I was explaining to him about, you know, I couldn't stop talking about electric vehicles because I was so passionate with them. I'd connected emotionally with them, and I'm a very emotional person. You know, I don't know if you know, I was quite successful at sport, and I put that down to I was emotionally connected to the sport. You know, the sport chose me, love things that love you, become passionate about them. I looked for solutions. I looked for ways to be successful. So I brought that mindset to Connected Kerb. And so, you know, you'll see there's a certain culture running through the company where we are looking to, do good things, enter into win-win situations, do good things for the company, do good things for the community, do good things for everybody. We are not about win-lose situations. Life should definitely be a win-win situation, where we can give value, whether that be to the environment, whether that be to our customers, whether that be to the end users of our product. That is something that runs throughout this company, runs throughout me as an individual, and runs through everything that we do. So just moving on to the next slide. So obviously I was thinking about things, I was reading things when I got to join Connected Kerb. Sorry, John, just moving on to the next screen. As I say, this was part of my education. I had a lot of passion, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge about EV. And it was great, to work with people like Giles, with people like Chris, who, my masterminds. I have the passion, but I feed off their knowledge. And there are certain facts that I learned about and read, that I didn't know when I first joined Connected Kerb, that 95% of the time from a car's, being in the factory, being produced to the time it meets the scrapyard, it's stationary for 95% of that time. The number of cars that are on the road, 80% of all daily journeys are 40 miles or less. So if we do have home charging, then, that will facilitate most of charging needs, OLED funding. So I'm just saying you that all these facts, when we consider them, they the facts together, they build up a picture. And so if we can take on board those facts, 3 to 22 kilowatt charging is the most cost-effective, least grid stressing, scalable form of EV charging. There's been a lot of talk about rapid charging and should this charging, and my experience have shown me, having a Tesla, that I'd rather charge at home overnight and pay for it than go and charge my Tesla at a supercharger, which is free. Because I was fortunate enough to get a certain age of Tesla. That means that, it's free supercharge. And I've driven from my house to Biarritz, which is in the south of France, didn't cost me a penny. And that's what I need that sort of charging for. But my home charging, I just pay 5p per kilowatt because I know that my time is valuable. So even if I can travel 20 minutes down the road, charge up for free, and, drive 20 minutes back, that's not a valuable use of my time. It is better for me to pay a small amount and charge overnight. So that's what we want to do. We want to give everyone that same ease and convenience. So moving on to the next slide. So Connected Kerb. So all that thinking, all that knowledge, all the wealth of experience, likes of Giles Kinnersley, who's going to speak to you after me, Chris Pateman-Jones, who has a wealth of experience with infrastructure, my passion as well. All the people at Connected Kerb, our team has grown from, I think it was 9 people. It started off with 4 founders. It was 9 people when myself and Chris Pateman-Jones entered the company. I think there's about 30 or 40 of us working remotely, soon to move into a new office in town. And, that wealth of knowledge that we bring together has provided what you see before you. And if we want to dissect this mission statement, because this is very important, this mission statement, because this is what keeps us grounded. Anything that we do at Connected Kerb, if it doesn't sit with this mission statement, that's how we know as a company if we're going off track. If, when Chris Pateman-Jones makes big decisions, which are worth millions and millions of pounds and going to help shape the future and the streets that we live in. When he has to make those decisions, which are, he has obviously a great team around him, some great engineers, great thinkers. We are people that have helped to, help the government to, bring the date of the ICE car ban from 2040 all the way to 2030. But say everything we do is underpinned with this statement, and that's how it's so easy for us to know that we are doing the right thing. So when you listen to the other speakers, I want you to have this mission statement in mind, and let's sort of dissect it for a moment. And I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to go on too much. That's the only downside of passion. You have to rein it in. And sometimes my colleagues tell me to shut up sometimes. So I like to over deliver. I like to give value because I want people to feel what I'm feeling, because I feel that if we are all on board and we all adhere to this mission statement, then we can't go wrong. We look for solutions rather than look for problems. We don't procrastinate. We step forward with confidence, knowing that we have this in our minds. And, you know, I can let you guys read it, but as I say, we are here to accelerate the transition of green mobility, you know, whether that is, you know, cars, whether that's scooters, whether that's even walking, because, you know, I have an EV now, but the way I think about transport, my connection with the car, I see it now just as a mode of transport. You know, I'm of a certain age, I'll admit it. You know, I've had my jab, but I'm of a certain age that the relationship between me and my car back in the day when I was playing at Wigan was a little bit different. It was a status symbol. You know, I thought I was the man when I got my my SL convertible. I'm not ashamed to say it. When I was driving down with the roof down, you know, the main boulevard in Manchester, you know, I had a certain sense of significance that, you know, I'd achieved something. You know, obviously I've got MBEs, I've got statues, I've got certain things, but certain things in life, you know, that's why we try to keep up the Joneses, because we think that just because we have those things that, you know, we are at a certain station. But as we get older in life, we realize that's not true. You know, what makes us believe that we have done things great is when we help other people and we all move forward together in win-win situations. That's very important. So I say green mobility for all people. That means all people, people who have electric vehicles, people who don't have electric vehicles. That's why our solutions are for everybody. Promoting livable streets, and providing, you know, accessible, environmentally friendly, you know, and future-proofed infrastructure. So I really want you to just take a moment to read this statement, let it disseminate into you. And when you are listening to all our other speakers, I want you to have this question in mind: are Connected Kerb living up to their mission statement? Because if they're not, you know, I want you to send me an email. I want you to connect with us and put us back on the right track. Because I believe as long as companies are adhering and living up to their mission statement, they cannot go wrong, and they move forward with communities, with everybody, because, you know, that's what it's all about. Hopefully I'm not getting too passionate, because I can feel the hairs stand up on the back of my neck, and I think I'm back out at Wembley in 1994. I can see myself going for that try, creating moments, creating connections with people. That's what I'm about. I'm very passionate, and I think that's why Connected Kerb have got me on board. But as I say, sometimes I know too much. But yes, I would just like to finish off by saying that you know, now is the time to listen to everyone else with this conversation. But when you're listening, be mindful of what we are saying, you know, what Chris is saying, what Giles is saying, and to ask yourself, you know, when you hear the technologies, when you hear about the no box, saying, you know, oh, I get it now. Yes, you know, because when it all makes sense for you and you believe it, then, you know, we don't need to do anything else. Because if we could, you know, put my emotion in you and you get it and you have your eureka moment, then you'll be going off, you know, spreading the word, doing things for us, and we move forward together. I said, it's not like us win and you lose. It's like we win, you win, because you do great things, and everything that you need to achieve, you get done. And that's how positivity spreads, because, you know, as they say, what goes around comes around. I'll shut up now because I've said too much. I've taken up too much time from Chris and Giles. So I know if there are any questions, you know, ask them now, or, you know, wait, probably better off, you know, wait until the end of the full presentation and we can ask questions then, you know, but I'm on social media, I'm everywhere. So you can always get hold of me if something comes to you, you want to ask something, you want to know something, you want to engage with us. And yeah, we're Connected Kerb. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Martin. Just a quick question from me. How long does it actually take to charge? Not specifically the Tesla, because I know the Tesla is effectively the Apple of the car world, needing different connectivity. But you mentioned having to drive somewhere, or potentially driving, you know, 20 minutes down the road for free charging. There's a charging point, for instance, in the local Sainsbury's, but what I wouldn't want to do is have to go and sit in my car for an hour.
Exactly. That's why I said time, you know, all these little sayings that we learn over the years, you know, have relevance. You know, time is money. And that's why it is good to, and I also said, and one of the facts to consider, cars are stationary for 95% of the time. Doesn't it make sense then to charge the cars while they're stationary? Because if they're stationary, then, you know, it's like you're not going anywhere. Even if you have to drive to Sainsbury's, you know, if you're shopping at Sainsbury's, then then that's okay. You can go to Sainsbury's and charge your car. But, you know, it's almost like you want to fit charging into your life rather than fit your life into charging. Again, that's what we're thinking about. That's why we want cars to charge overnight. You know, each car has a different time to charge it from 0 to 100. But we know most cars will charge overnight on a standard 7 kilowatt charging system overnight, whether it's a Tesla, whether it's an i3, whether it's a Porsche Taycan. So it will charge overnight. Your car's going to be there overnight, so it makes sense to charge it. If you forget, if you need to go somewhere further than the length of your, the range of your vehicle, then you might need other solutions. But if you're doing what 80% of the country is doing, then you just charge your car overnight. It doesn't matter whether it's finished, the charging finishes and is complete at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. You know, when you get up in the morning, you'll have a full tank of gas, and that's all you need to know, really. And that comes off a 7 kilowatt charger, you know, single phase charging, what most houses can facilitate.
That's great. Thank you very much, Martin. They're clearly not paying you enough for your passion. I think we're now.
I have heard that on more than one call, and I'm glad that Chris Pateman-Jones is on this call to hear that, because that's happened on, I think, 3 or 4 occasions now. So again, as I say, you over deliver, you give value. That's what I do as an individual. That's what Connected Kerb do. And as I say, we live to our mission.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we're handing now straight over to Giles, also from Connected Kerb. Go ahead, Giles.
Good morning. Thank you for your time today. My name is Giles Kinnersley. I'm the account director at Connected Kerb. I've been in the industry for over 12 years, and what I'm going to talk to you is about the benefits of EV from a financial, environmental, but also a driver experience as well. So if we move on to the next slide. So the whole reason we're sort of doing EV, why we're moving to electric vehicles, is because it's largely because of the environmental concerns, so climate change, greenhouse gases, and as part of that, 28% of greenhouse gases come from transport, specifically vehicles, so road vehicles, cars and lorries and other transport vehicles. So that's about 38 million tonnes of carbon dioxide through vehicles. So moving to EVs, a driver can typically save 1,400 kilograms of CO2 per year. That's roughly the weight of two dairy cows or a small hatchback. So if you think about the impact that has just switching over to EV, that's a huge benefit for the environment. Just on that, just so the reasons why we need to cut that down, I think if you've watched any of the David Attenborough documentaries such as A Life on This Planet, A Life on Our Planet, or A Perfect Planet, it really shows the importance of cutting those down, as well as just some statistics that I find really intriguing, such as since the 1950s, almost half of the plankton in the sea has been killed off due to climate change, and plankton and sea and marine plants are responsible for about 80% of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. So it's these things and the climate change and the adverse effects it has on the weather that make it really important that we do this now. So just moving on to sort of the vehicle. So operational costs and running costs are about half of what you pay on a traditional vehicle, and that comes largely through an EV only having about 20 moving parts, whereas a traditional vehicle has around 2,000. On an EV, you only really ever have to change fluids for coolant, brake, and windscreen, whereas there's a lot more maintenance involved with traditional vehicles, as well as things like EVs and other traditional vehicles also have regenerative braking, but on an EV it's more efficient. So just in terms of the way that works in reducing maintenance costs and upkeep of brake discs and brake pads, and also putting energy back into the vehicle. So there's a whole host of things that make more sense and make it easier because of the simpler model and the simpler drivetrain of an EV over a traditional vehicle. So if we move on to the next one. So I think in probably my sort of 12 years, I've probably given over, I'd say over 1,000 test drives and taken a few thousand people out in EVs. And one of the things that strikes me is that people always seem very sort of surprised as to the performance of an EV and expect it. I think there's an expectation that they'll be slow or they'll be sluggish or they won't perform the same as a sort of traditional vehicle. But what I find is that people are always very impressed with how they handle the speed, the lightness. And I think there's a real sort of a new sort of phenomenon with EVs where we talk about launching an EV, just sort of noticing that real sort of 0 to 60 peak improvements that peak performance that you see on an EV. So I think that's quite new, and I think there's there are still some sort of misconceptions about how an EV will handle, but if you actually look at it and actually test drive it, I think most people are pleasantly surprised. And then just on filling up, so running costs. So from an individual through to a fleet, what you find is that petrol prices are around 3 times cheaper than filling up. So typically you're looking at about £1.25 for petrol and diesel at the moment. With an EV, it's roughly a third of that cost. So over a lifetime or a year, when you're looking at vehicle costs, it's much cheaper to use EV. And then if we move on to the next one. So quieter roads and workplaces. So with an EV, obviously you don't have all the external noise and the additional noise that they create. So it leads to quieter roads and workplaces. So not only is that beneficial for reducing noise pollution and the potential damages that causes on our health, I just think that in a street, in a city, in a town, or when you go on holiday, one of the first things you notice if you're on a busy road is all that road noise, and just EVs just moves away from that as well. So if we move to the next one. And then cleaner air. So air pollution is contributing to a large number of deaths every year. So in the UK, that's 40,000 deaths, as well as illnesses such as asthma, lung disease, heart disease, strokes, and that's about 8% of premature deaths every year, and also the additional illness that causes as well. And that's something like 4.2 million people every year that are dying due to air pollution, largely in places like China and India where it's much more prevalent. But I think even in the UK, I think that's still a staggering statistic, and just being able to take that away would be much better for everybody involved as well. So if we move to next slide. So in terms of financials, so at the moment, an EV, you'll only pay 1% benefit in kind through sort of company cars and fleet cars. So what that equates to is if you take a Tesla Model 3, for example, a month that'll cost you benefit in kind tax around £13. Whereas if you had a sort of equivalent C-Class or 3 Series, that would be around £300 a month, £300 to £400 a month, depending on tax brackets and stuff like that as well. So that's a huge incentive, and that's sort of why EVs are really sort of taking off, is because of the incentives and subsidies that are involved. Next year that moves to 2%, so that'll be around £26, and that 2% is held until 2025. There's also 100% first year capital allowance tax on vehicles, and a lot of employers are doing salary sacrifice schemes, so that takes advantage of taking away the contributions before tax and national insurance as well. So there's a lot of beneficial schemes in place to encourage uptake of pure EVs now. And then on government subsidies incentives, there's new funding announced for this quite constantly, and I think they're really sort of looking to push this more and more, and I'll touch on that in the next slide as well. But also 15% of the UK's second-hand market is now EVs, so there's growing options there as well. And then just on the different ownership models, so there's traditional sort of buy, lease, hire purchase schemes as well, but there's also subscription schemes at the moment as well, and some of these are really good if you're looking to sort of try out an EV on a short-term basis. So I think there's a few companies that do sort of 30-day subscriptions with no sort of ongoing payments, so you can just try it for say 30 days at really good rates as well. So there are options, and I'd say that's a really good one if you're looking to sort of test out an EV to see how it fits in with your life, how it fits in with your sort of day-to-day routines as well. So there's a load of really sort of innovative models on this at the moment as well. And then just on the road tax and congestion, so EVs are exempt from a lot of this as well. So your pure EVs are exempt from road tax, and then anything that has emissions, even one emission, those that all have to pay tax now. So the government is really trying to push people towards pure EV. If we move to the next slide, please. So, as I say, EVs typically cost around 4p per mile. With diesel and petrol, you're looking at around 12p per mile. And then just on some of the OZEV, that's the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, there are several schemes at the moment for this. So there's home schemes. So if you've got the ability to have off-road parking, there's £350 off eligible installs and hardware. There's workplace schemes as well, so £350 off per socket for up to 40 sockets. So that's a potential saving of £14,000 across your business. And then there's a plug-in car grant off the cost of a new vehicle as well. So that's £2,500 up for vehicles under £35,000 with zero emissions. And then there's also on-street residential charging schemes as well. So where you're going to need to be able to charge on street, there are schemes available now, and that's changed to £13,000 with no project cap per socket. So there's real incentive and motivation at the moment to do this now. If you move to the next slide, please. So you're probably sort of asking yourself, where can I charge? And probably the first thing and probably most convenient option will be home charging. However, there's probably around 62% of people that won't be able to home charge, either due to not having off-road parking or just not having the correct power required, or being in like a listed building or just not being able to do that. So those people are going to need options, so especially for home-based fleets and company car drivers where they don't have home charging option, they're going to need on-street residential, and we can help with that. We can help with lobbying the council to get that on-street residential charging in place. And there's also workplace charging is hugely important, and there's several strategies that as business owners and managers you can employ as to whether you have free vend charging, whether you offer charging that can be reimbursed through salaries, and we have solutions in place for that as well. And then there's depots and charging hubs as well, especially for fleets. But then there's also destination and commercial parking, where EV makes a lot of sense. So places where you can be in long dwell, places where you can be stopping and repeating business as well. But I think what you'll see is that you won't necessarily let the battery drain to zero and then think, I've got to charge my car. It'll be more a case of, in those places, you'll be able to top up as you go. So as you go to the supermarket, as you go to a hotel, as you go to a gym or a restaurant or the cinema, you'll be able to stop there, charge up and move on. And for some people, that's a really good way of doing it. Obviously, if you say going on holiday or doing a lot of company miles a day and you need someone to charge, maybe Rapid will make more sense for you in that instance as well. So there's a whole host of blended solutions, but also the fast charge, so that the 7 to 22 kilowatt is massively important. And I spent a lot of time in Amsterdam, in the Nordics as well, where that's become sort of the accepted model of charging is fast charging, long dwell charging, because it has that less impact on the grid, but also requires a lot less physical space, and also the actual cost of the units is much cheaper. It's much easier to give the numbers of charge points you'll need, publicly available charge points, with fast charging. So, for example, I think we need 2.9 million charge points in the UK before the end of 2030, and realistically that's going to need to be fast charging. So if we move on to next slide. So just some market statistics. So what we saw last year was there was a huge annual increase from 2019 to 2020. So that was a 66% increase in pure EV, even with coronavirus. And I think that was largely in part due to benefit in kind tax as well. So what we're looking at is, at the moment, there are just under 500,000 plug-in vehicles on the road, and then with 235,000 of those being pure EV. And what you'll see is that move to pure EV over plug-in hybrids is going to keep growing and growing and growing. So if we move to next slide, please. And then this just to go through the charge points that are in the public. So the slow is typically 3 to 5 kilowatt, and fast being 7 to 22. As you can see over the years, that fast and slow is growing and becoming the dominant charging type, just for those sort of reasons I've mentioned before. But I think you just see that this will continue to grow as well. And I think at the moment we're looking at about 37,000 public charge points available. And as I say, we need to get to about 2.9 million by 2030. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's all from me. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to go through.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Giles. I know we've got a few accountants in the room today, and I can imagine them all jotting that information down, whether they may well have known, you know, regarding the benefits in kind and stuff in any case, but it's useful for them to be able to share with their wider audience too, and it's something that I wasn't aware of for sure. We have had a couple of questions. So Sue Egan asked, would it not be an idea to be able to remove the battery and charge it indoors? Is that an option? Or potentially have two, so you carry a spare one for longer journeys? I'm guessing batteries are pretty heavy though.
Yeah, the vehicle battery itself is quite long as well, so it pretty much fits under the chassis of the vehicle. So it's not really something that you can remove easily in that regard. But the battery technology is improving constantly as well. So so the range is increasing, size and everything, and the just the sort of reliability of batteries. So, for example, if a battery cell did die, it wouldn't mean the whole battery has to be replaced. It can be just that individual battery, and most batteries have sort of between 100 and 200 different cells. So if one does fail, it can be simply replaced. Also, just on the batteries, that most vehicles come with sort of between an 8 to 12 year guarantee, and something like 80 to 120,000 mile guarantee on those as well. So it's not realistically something that you can transport. There are sort of leasing schemes on batteries you can take out as well. So you have sort of so you sort of lease the battery and then own the cost separately. So there are different schemes on it on that regard.
Thank you. How much is a home charging point approximately?
Depends on the sort of the individual setup. It can range from, I say, anywhere with the OLIV grant. It can range from anything from probably £3,000 to £2,000 on a typical standard home install. But it all depends on what your power setup is, what's required on the install. So yeah, but say just depends on what vehicle you have, what charge point you prefer, so what's going to fit your home. But yeah, it's I'd say rough guide somewhere between sort of 350 to 2,000.
Great, that's wonderful, thank you. Giuseppe made a good point, and actually something that I'd written down as well, because I think it was on the news last week. There have been complaints from certainly guide dog users, because guide dogs listen for vehicles. Yeah. And I think that was the news item, but somebody else picked up on it. There have been sort of various near misses with people not using the noise emitter, which is an option, I believe, on some vehicles. So quieter streets, hurrah, not so good for the visually impaired, I suppose, as much as anything.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think that will become sort of standardised, that you have to have a noise-making device, because, like I say, for a lot of people, when you cross the road, you don't look. You're more than likely just to listen and then just cross sometimes. So I think that needs to sort of be implemented as a standard. But I'd say you can, yeah, I'd say it depends. So sometimes you can, sometimes you can't hear them, but I think that needs to be a standardized regulation, I think.
Thank you. Questions coming in thick and fast. If and Chris may want to answer or have some of this in his presentation, so feel free to butt in, Chris, if needs be. If EV adoption increases dramatically, and this is from Craig Atkins at OneFix, which it looks poised to do with the mainstream manufacturers having more cars coming on stream, will the charging infrastructure rollout keep up with demand? You mentioned we need 2.9 million and there are only what? Way less than that at the moment, to avoid the no charge point availability at destinations.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we need to do. That's why we need more. We need to get the infrastructure in place. So it is kind of a chicken and egg situation, but we need to get the infrastructure in place, and we need to do that with the majority, I think, is fast 7 to 22 kilowatt charging, publicly available, being able to just to give people the confidence to know that if they've got an EV, they're going to be able to charge it up, going to be able to reliably book a charge point and be able to have access to it. And I think the only way you'll be able to do that is with fast charging, because, for example, I was in the US a couple of years ago in a Tesla, going to a Tesla superstation, and there were four chargers, and one was offline, 3 were in use, and there were about 14 vehicles in front of me. And it wasn't a case of the person charging would come straight back to the car and move it. They'd be in the cafe, in the restaurant, and it'd be an hour later. So I think just the idea of, especially in the UK, I think people going to, let's say, services or a charging hub to try and rapid charge when there's less availability of them anyway, but then driving there in the first place and then having to wait, not just to get the charge, but then to charge. I think that's why it makes much more sense to have it available on public streets, locally available, universally accessible, easy and transparent to see how much it's actually going to charge you. That's what we need to get to. So that's why we need it on street. That's why we need it in destinations like hotels, like car parks, restaurants, where you're able to just top up. And I think that is the aim.
That's wonderful. There is another question, but it's very technical. So what I might do is actually pass that on direct to you, Giles, separately, just because I'm aware of time. So Howard, if you don't mind, I'll copy that and send it directly to Charles, and he'll come back to you. I'm pretty sure. If that okay with Charles, okay with Howard?
Yeah.
Good. Lots of funnies coming in as well now, I have to say. But thank you so much for your time. It's great to hear such passion from people who don't even sell cars. So on that note, I'll hand over, if you don't mind, to Chris Pateman-Jones, CEO at Connected Kerb.
Hello everyone, and thank you for having me, and thank you both to my colleagues for teeing this up very nicely. I think you've covered off a whole load of the different things that needed to be just talked about, and that some of the stuff I'm going to sort of reiterate now. I hope also that everyone listening on the call is now pretty motivated about the switch to EV, and so I guess my job here is to tell you how you might be able to do it and how you might be able to actually deploy that infrastructure. I may turn my video off in a minute just because my internet quality is pretty poor, but hopefully it's working at the moment. So if I can move to the first slide, please. Thank you very much. And as it sort of comes up on your screen, as in the next one, if possible, please. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. So just while we're doing that, there was a statistic that Giles mentioned in the presentation, 2.9 million public charging points. That's not a statistics that we've come up with. That is independent data that was developed for the government by a research duo called Frost and Sullivan. It's publicly available information. So what is quite interesting, though, is when you look at those numbers, as Giles sort of touched on, there's 30,000 of them publicly at the moment. And unfortunately, looking at the lifespan of most of the kit that's deployed, all of them will have to be replaced by the time we hit the 2030 target, which is a bit of a shocker. So the average charge point lasts for 5 to 7 years in the UK, unfortunately, at the moment. So I think it's actually almost worse when you think that all those 30,000 that have been deployed to date will need to be replaced. and I'll touch a little bit more on that in a second. Just to start off with though, so Connected Kerb, we're a smart cities and EV charging business. I just guess this is a bit of a holding slide, but the image in the background there is one of our geckos. It's on a parking bollard there. And the important thing to mention before I sort of talk into the slides in any more detail is the uniqueness of the system that we have. That is the grey thing you see on there. We call that our gecko. It is purely a socket, really. There's nothing particularly intelligent about it. It's a socket that's on the street and sits on existing street furniture. The intelligence sits beneath the ground. So you can see that sort of the metal black plate that sits at the bottom. That bolts into our foundation case, which sits underneath the ground. And that is where we house our charging point. That is what is unique about the Connected Kerb system, because it means that when someone comes and breaks the socket, which they tend to, so it's the critical failure point on charging points, you only have to replace the bollard and the gecko itself. You don't have to replace the expensive charging point itself. So we can replace it, have it back operational within about 45 minutes. And it's a cost that is a fraction of the cost of any of our competition in terms of replacing their units. The other point on this is that everything you see there is made from recycled materials, which we think is quite a nice thing. If I can move on to the next slide, if possible. Thank you. So the other part is just, so you're obviously all pretty teed up now and excited about the EV switch. Thanks to Giles and Martin for that. I just wanted to talk to you about the way that we try and communicate the EV deployment to our clients and the things that we encourage them to sort of think about. A little bit of our knowledge, sort of trying to impart it in 5 sort of easy themes for you to remember. The first one, and Martin and Giles have both touched on this, is convenience and confidence, or convenience and reliability. People seek this more than anything else. So the message you hear in the market, it's all about rapid and ultra rapid charging. And when I refer to rapid and ultra rapid, rapid is 50 kilowatts and upwards, and ultra rapid is beyond that, so 150 kilowatts and upwards from there. The view is, and this is I think probably coincidental with the people who are pushing the message, is that is the best possible way you can charge your car. The reality is, however, that it's a bit of an oxymoron sometimes. So if you have to drive somewhere and wait and queue to charge your car, doesn't matter how fast the charging experience the charger is when you're actually charging, the actual experience itself isn't fast. When you compare that to you charging at work or at home on your driveway or at home on a street, where it might take 10 or well 3, 4, 5, 6, any length of time to charge your car, depending on the battery capacity you have and how much charge there is in the vehicle. The point is the experience of charging is 30 seconds. You turn up, you plug in, you press go, and you're done. So people seem to preferentially prefer that sort of convenience. So the important thing for all of us when we look at infrastructure is that it has to be ubiquitous, there have to be a lot of them, and they have to be in the places where people want to charge. Importantly, as Martin said, they have to be in the places where the cars sit for longest periods of the time, not doing anything. The benefits of that are that you can charge more smartly. So you don't have to necessarily charge as soon as the vehicle is plugged in. You can charge at the optimum time when the power is cheapest and most abundant in the grid. The second part, beyond the convenience piece, so that's convenience, people want to charge where they want to charge and as easily as they possibly can. The second part is on this reliability and confidence. So it's confidence that, one, when you turn up somewhere, there's going to be a charging point available for you, and that comes to the Frost & Sullivan data on 2.9 million charging points. And the second part, that when you get there, that the charging points will be working. And I think Giles touched on that earlier on, that a lot of the charging networks just aren't reliable enough. And again, we tried to tackle that with separating the socket above the ground from the charger beneath the ground. The second part I'd like to talk to is just the opportunity that deploying charging infrastructure gives you. So when you talk about it at a small scale, 2, 3, 4 charging points in a car park, there is an opportunity to do cool things. The same as if you talk about that sort of mass scale national deployment. And what I guess I'm referring to there is when you go and dig a street or you dig a car park up to put charging points in and put cables under the ground, there is an opportunity to put more in that trench than just the charging points. So we talk about that as enabling smart cities. You can put fast fiber connections in there as well as the power connections, and you can do a whole load of other different things. So I'll talk about how we tackle that in a moment, but there is a real opportunity for the UK government to be thinking about more broadly than just EV charging. The third one is around the environment. So really thinking about how the impact of the infrastructure actually on the environment. So from a visual perspective, again, if you were to deploy millions of charging points across the UK, we're very fortunate that our streets and cities and towns and villages are attractive spaces. If you deploy that many big sort of petrol pump style units on the street, you're going to have a material impact on the way that our streets feel and look. So the visuals is important, but equally the lifespan of the kit is important. So if your charging point lasts 5 to 7 years, It's not only terrible from an economic perspective and difficult to make from a business model perspective, but it is also pretty damaging from an environmental perspective if you're having to dig the street repeatedly and sending the kit off either to landfill or even at best partial recycling. So the lifespan is important. And then finally, on the environmental side, it's the materials. So we make our kit to have a lifespan of upwards of 15 years, typically 15 to 25 years, with the infrastructure beneath the ground lasting a lot longer. And we make all of our kit out of recycled materials. We think that everyone should be copying us in this regard. It's odd to want people to copy your USP. We do. Unfortunately, very few are at the moment. In fact, we're not aware of any other charging businesses using recycled materials. The fourth one is on technology development. So the automotive industry is moving very quickly. Cars are moving on, becoming smarter and smarter, requiring more and more data. And there's also talk about whether we'll move away from plug-in charging to inductive wireless charging. We don't necessarily see that as being wide scale, but who knows? The point we're making on this in terms of trend 4 is don't take bets on the future. We haven't taken bets. What we tried to do is we built flexibility into our infrastructure. So again, separating the socket from the charger means that we can do inductive wireless charging because our kit sits beneath the ground, and we have a fast fiber connection to all of our charging points, meaning we can serve connected autonomous vehicles in the event that they come. And then the final point here is commercial viability. So most charging businesses are losing an awful lot of money. And the reason for that is because they focus purely on EV charging. They don't consider any of the smart cities opportunities. Their kit costs too much to operate and maintain, and it doesn't last long enough. So you have to earn your money back over a very short period of time. We've tried to tackle all of those things. And then if I may, there's just a final point I would mention as well is when you're thinking about deploying, the thing that we also try and focus on is educating people. So at the moment in our market, we all sort of think EV is obvious and everyone should be switching. The reality is it's a big decision for a lot of people. And you really have to invest where you deploy the infrastructure in also educating the population and reaching out to them. If I can move on to the next slide, please. And this just really says, okay, so those were the 5 themes. This is how Connected Kerb addresses it. And that's one of our chargers in the background again. It's the same Gecko unit, the same below ground infrastructure, but using a parking post instead on this occasion. Just for context, there are we think it's about 980,000 parking posts in London alone, almost all of which are at the front of the pavement. So we designed that looking at the lamp column charging infrastructure and thinking it's a really good idea to use existing street furniture. We did, however, look at lamp columns and think there isn't enough power in them. Typically, you can get 1 to 2 kilowatts of power for charging from them, so it will take you a very long time to charge your car. There's also a problem that they're normally being moved to the back of the pavement rather than the front, and they're often not in the right locations, therefore. So the beauty of these is bollards are typically at the front of the pavement, parking posts are at the front, and we can put our own power supply into them. So we have a 7 to 22 or a 3 to 22 kilowatt smart charging system. So that is considered to be slow fast. As I say, 22 is up at the far, or 7 to 22 is up at the fast range, and slow is the sort of 3 kilowatt range. So perfect for long dwell charging locations. All of our sockets are interchangeable. So when that socket on that post, if it gets damaged or broken, if we can't replace it on site, or repair it on site, we just lift it off and put a new one in its place. And we lift off just the socket, not necessarily the whole parking post. Made out of recycled materials. So really good from an environmental perspective. They're smart and connected, so that means we can do load management of power across the system. Really important for businesses where there may be a limited power supply. You do not want to spend time and money upgrading your power connections, so it's important that we operate within them. Could you mind if I go back to the previous slide? Thank you. So smart and connected in terms of that power management piece, and then equally those bollards and the parking posts, the fact that we have a data connection with them means that we can do some quite interesting things. So if it's in a car parking situation or a car park rather, we could put out parking sensors, and we can equally put out things like air quality sensors and so on, and support Wi-Fi and other different things. I mentioned it's future-proof, so we can support the future technologies like connected autonomous vehicles and wireless charging. And then most importantly, from an from a security and an O&M perspective, we're able to replace and repair things extremely quickly. That's one of the things we're most proud of. If I can go on to the next slide, just to show you it in situ. And then very quickly on to the next one after that, just to show you them in reality. So again, the Gecko designed for really busy, cluttered streets, designed for high density deployments, and made from recycled materials. You can probably hear in the background, I have my 3-year-old has just returned home. So apologies if you're hearing a screaming. He's just returned back. It's the nature of working from home. If I can move on to the next slide, please. He's obviously had a very bad start to the morning is all I'll say. The Armadillo, this is another one of our interchangeable charging sockets. So the below ground infrastructure stays exactly the same. It's just a different socket type. This one is designed not for residential streets. It's designed, this is a marketing image, it's designed really for perimeter, the perimeters of car parks where you can bury it within landscaped areas and where it can be really visually discreet. But it's made of, again, recycled vehicle tires. So really, really good from an environmental perspective, and also able to take a bit of a knock. So quite good for fleet spaces. And as I say, those public sort of car parks where you're likely to get a bit of a bash every so often. So made from recycled vehicle tires and can therefore take a bit of an impact. Next slide, please. And then the final one to show you today, and there are some others as well that we've got, so a home charging solution and our new on-street units. But this is the Limpets. This is a wall-mounted solution. It was designed with some of our partners in the commercial car parking space. Again, made from recycled vehicle tires, really durable and robust. And each of these charging points has a lighting ring around the socket, so really good for low light conditions. Obviously, we're trying to make them as visually discreet as possible, but we do want people to be able to see them. So they know where to go. If I can go on to the next one. So all of that thinking, all of the, there's an interesting box on there that shouldn't be on there, but no problem. So all of that sort of thinking has led to us being recognised in the UK and around the world actually for the technology we've developed. The recognition we tend to get either is around innovation or the environment and sustainability. So we won the Mayor of London Civic Innovation Award. That was a big award that sort of kicked everything off for us. It gave us a number of different deployment opportunities. And then since then, we've won a whole load of others. The most important ones I'd probably flag would be the SEAL Global Sustainability Award. This is the world's biggest environmental and sustainability award. We won it last year. They select the 50 greenest organisations and initiatives around the world, and we were fortunate enough to be one of those, which was a big day for us. We finished off last year with 2 awards at the EVs and the EV World Congress for Best Product and Best On-Street Charging Solution. Again, a big session for us in that those are industry awards, so being recognised amongst our peers was important. And then finally, I'd mention the partnership that we have with the UN and UNESCO. They were looking back on their 75 years of existence and then looking forward to the next 75 years as to what cities would look like in the future. And we were the only charging business invited to be part of that. So that was quite a big deal. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're a growing UK business. We manufacture in the UK. We're owned as a UK business and we have UK IP involved in this. We have, when I say we're growing, this is a small number of our partners. So far, the list seems to be growing all the time. So I get asked how many charging points we have and it changes daily, which is a happy place to be. We work across local government. We work with the private sector as well. In local government, one of the biggest relationships we have is with Swindon Borough Council, where we've done a huge project, which was a joint venture project with them and Barratt David Wilson Homes, 3,500 home development just outside of Swindon. But we work, as I say, across the UK. So that is from down here in London all the way up into Scotland. And increasingly, we're now starting to look overseas as well. We've got some strategic partners, I think, to Martin's points around our ethical sort of stance on things. We partner pretty closely with some of the disabled driver groups. We've actually got 2 innovation projects at the moment, one with SSEN and one with Scottish Transport looking at disabled drivers. And then equally, we have some other innovation projects, one with Schneider Electric looking at our home charger, being able to integrate it into the actual build of the home. So it's not a big unit that sticks on the side of the building. It's something that can actually be integrated into the home as it's being built. And then also we have a really interesting project with Bays, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, where we are looking at how you can bring some of the convenience that home charging, literally driveway charging, i.e. being able to choose when your car charges and when it doesn't, based on tariff, how we can port some of that capability to on-street charging as well, which is quite exciting. And then from a commercial perspective, we have some of the world's biggest companies as our clients, so Prologis, Avison Young, and some of the others. So, and equally working with some of the business and science parks are probably the most famous one that we work with at the moment is Cambridge Science Park. So quite an exciting one there, the UK's leading science park, we believe, at the moment. Okay, next slide, please. I should say we would like that list to continue to grow. So if any of you would like to work with us, then we'd be delighted to have a conversation. Just to show you sort of how all that now fits together, because I've sort of talked through our sockets. What I'd really like to show you now is what is the clever stuff that sits beneath the ground, because the stuff that you can see behind me, it might look nice, but it's not really the intelligence. It's a pretty looking plug. This is the clever stuff. So this is what goes beneath the ground. So what you see there is two bits. One is the outer shell. We call that our node box. That is a structural piece of kit that sits beneath the ground. We put that in, it's empty. All it has is ducting connecting it between all of the node boxes that are on the street. And then when you're ready to put the charging point in, so when you're ready to commission it, or for example, if it's a new car park and you put node boxes in every couple of spaces, when you say you want to put the charging points in, you might want to put in only a couple of them. And at that point, you put the inner box in. The inner box is our power and data pack. That is essentially the charger. It's all the controls, the fuses, and everything else in there. And you can see to the right of it, there's a cable. That's a waterproof box, and the cable then comes up and plugs into the socket above the ground. So again, just to reiterate, when the socket gets broken or someone drives into it, does whatever it is to it, you just replace the socket. The charger still sits safe and secure beneath the ground. We've actually had a perfect example of that in the last few days. One of our units has been damaged, and we just need to go and replace the socket. So it's going to cost us a couple of £100 versus a few £1,000 if it was a Pod Point, a BP Polar, or any of the others. Next slide, please. And I should say also that steel is, as you would expect, recycled, and we're actually moving to a box which is made from recycled plastics pretty soon. So now just to show you what that looks like on the street. So on the left-hand side of that, you'll see a little a vertical sort of rectangle. That is essentially a feeder pillar that you would see on the street. So those are your standard sort of electrical cabinets. We can sort of hide those. We've deployed them in heritage areas, so we can try and make them as invisible as possible. That is our connection to power and data. Beneath the ground then, as you see, you can see with the green and the yellow line, those are our ducts, a duct for fiber and a duct for power. And they connect with pull cords through them so that you can pull the wires at a later stage, but they connect into our node boxes. And you can see they're strung down the street. I think there's 8 of those on the street in this instance. We can put up to 25 single sockets off a feeder pillar. Typically though, we put 5 to 10 of the node boxes on a street. It obviously varies depending on site. If you could click on, please. The beauty of this though is that is enabling infrastructure. It's passive enabled infrastructure under the ground. So you go in and you dig the street once and you put everything in, or you dig the car park once and you put everything in. The point then is you can activate charging points, and you can activate them over time as demand rises. So you put all the infrastructure in, but you might not want to put 10, 15 charging points in on day one. You might only want to put 1 or 2 of them in there. The beauty of this system means that you can do that and then continue to add without having to go and redig everything up. If I could click on again and again. So you see there, we've just activated the whole street without necessarily having to go and redig everything. And then the final point I'd say is if you click once more, each one of those node boxes acts to support you connecting the city or connecting the car park or wherever it might be. The point is, again, there's a fiber connection to each of them. The node boxes act to support a whole load of other different things. So if you go to our sites, you'll see deployment of smart city sensors like air quality and parking sensors. And then the final point I'd say is just to we touched on the wireless inductive charging. Again, on the right-hand side there, you'll see the car. That's inductive charging. So there's a pad underneath the car that connects into the vehicle with an electromagnetic field. So we're able to do that with having the node box beneath the ground. So you can do either plug-in or inductive wireless charging from these below-ground infrastructure. Again, that is unique. And we think it is, again, a way that you can future-proof or protect what you're trying to do. Next slide, please. That's it. I thank you very much for listening to us. I know we've talked a little bit longer than we planned, but hopefully that was all interesting. I think there's quite a few questions coming in, so looking forward to talking through some of them.
There are indeed, and it's funny you mentioned Barratt David Wilson Homes, because we have an ex-member of Barratt David Wilson Homes in the audience who asked a question. So say we pulled up at one of those charging points on your previous slide, how much does it cost to charge? You know, if I sat there, I was working in the building next door and I parked my car there all day, how much do I have to pay for that?
So it varies. It varies purely because we have to make that agreement with the client that we're working with at the time. But typically what we aim to be is the maximum charge will be under 25p per kilowatt. It will vary also depending on time of day. So we try and have some, I was on a call yesterday with the Competition and Markets Authority for 4.5 hours, trying to explain to them that they should try and have greater transparency in terms of pricing per kilowatt. So we have, if you go to a number of other charging businesses, there will be a connection cost, and there'll also be a membership fee that you have to pay. We have no connection costs and we have no membership fees, so anyone can charge the system, charge on the units, providing they're open to public use. So if they're in a private car park, they'll be private, but if they're in public use, anyone can use them with no connection fees and no membership fees. What we do is we buy the power in, and if we buy the power in, say at 10p, we typically add a 10 to 12p margin on top of the power, and it's the combined cost of those two that you pay. The reason I explain that is because that's why the price varies, and it varies depending on what the power price is. And we've kept that as a variable because we want to incentivize people to charge when power is cheap, because when power is cheap, it's abundant in the grid. So that's the intent around that. So it's typically anywhere between 18 and 25p per kilowatt.
Thank you for that. Interesting, slightly not off topic, I suppose, but Henley Business School have asked the question, what are the skills that Connected Kerb need in the workforce to help you achieve your mission?
Well, if I look at our team at the moment now, we've got a fantastic selection of people ranging from the commercial through to the design and the project management side. So, and a few quite interesting graduates that have come into the business recently from an engineering perspective. So I think engineering is pretty important in terms of understanding the built environment. So I myself am from Bechtel previously, and then Ernst & Young. So an engineering and sort of infrastructure background. I think that's pretty important because this is a scale, this is a huge project. It dwarfs HS2 in terms of the overall size and scale that will be required across the UK in terms of also potential disruption. I think the other side is around the continuing innovation that we are doing as a business. So I don't think we're going to be innovating a huge amount more. We're going to be making some announcements in the next couple of months in terms of some of our new products coming to market that are physical. But beyond that, I don't think we'll be innovating a huge amount around the physical infrastructure. We'll be more innovating around the software side of what we do. So how do you use the data most effectively to be able to manage charging experiences for users? So my personal view is that we'll be moving away from a situation at the moment where you plug in and the car charges automatically, to instead you plug in and the charging is optimized, knowing when you're going to come and collect your vehicle again. So it might not start charging immediately, it will start charging and it will load your car when power is cheap and abundant, for example. We need to move to that in order to protect the grid. And so the guarantee will more be, instead of it starts charging as soon as you plug in, instead it's a guarantee that your car will be charged when you come back to it. So that's some of the innovation that we're working on now, and that's the work that we've got ongoing with Bays and Samsung and Octopus Energy. So I think around the software side, we also need it. And then I think really, I'd say it's some of the softer skills, really. I think when I look at the generation that's coming through, I think the collaboration and the recognition of working together, I think, is incredibly important. We recognize pretty early on that we can't do this on our own. We're not big enough, and we will never be big enough to be able to own every single charging point in the UK. I think there are a number of businesses out there that think that they can do everything on their own, and I think they're going to fail in this sector. This is EV in particular is a convergence of sectors. So you've got the automotive industry coming together with charging and a whole load of others with power and so on. And I think you have to be able to work together, looking to train young people. Those collaboration skills, understanding how commercial agreements work is incredibly important.
That's great. Thank you very much. Gosh, there's a lot coming through. In fact, some of your presentation actually answered some of the questions. My colleague has asked, oh gosh, I've lost the question now. Are local authorities doing enough? You've mentioned the project with Swindon Borough Council. Is the private sector moving fast enough?
The statistics that Charles talked about with the 2.9 million, no, they're not doing anywhere near enough at the moment, but it is still relatively early. If we continue on the same trajectory, we will miss the 2030 target by a very, very, very long way. But there is potential to accelerate. I think The problem at the moment is a lot of the pressure is on local authorities, and I think the government has come out with an overall target, but not necessarily with a full plan. And even where you sort of interrogate the plan, I don't think it's necessarily had the buy-in of the local authorities. So I think the local authorities get a lot of stick at the moment, but they don't necessarily have the capacity or the capability to deliver at the moment. So in terms of the knowledge of the EV charging sector and the guidance as to what should be done, and the risk around that is that they get led by certain actors in the market who have existing business models that they might want to protect. And the other risk is that we just don't deploy enough charging infrastructure. So it is something I think the government needs to step in a little bit more on. And I think also the government should take a bit more of a role in recognizing that it controls an awful lot of assets that it could deploy charging infrastructure on maybe more easily than local authorities could. So I think there's a bit of movement on both sides. And then the final point I'd say is that a lot of local authorities that we speak to have an internal battle going on between the desire to do something that helps climate change, because a lot of them have declared climate emergencies, and so they're wanting to do something. The challenge is that at the same time they're wanting to try and remove clutter and furniture from streets, and so there's this desire to have charging infrastructure but without adding anything to the street. And unfortunately, excuse me being a little facetious here, no one has yet designed a charging point that's invisible. I think we're about as close as you can get to it. And certainly the model that we're bringing out now, where the gecko disappears and it's just a socket in a bollard, or two sockets in a bollard, in fact, is a step in the right direction. But you can't have something for nothing. So I think there needs to be a bit more movement on that. And then the final point I'd say actually is that the only way this is solved is with private financing. So I don't think the local authorities have enough money to deploy enough charging points, and we're talking tens of thousands in each borough needed if you scale that 2.9 over the UK. They don't have enough money to deploy that, and therefore I think they need to get better at attracting private finance and patient capital rather than necessarily private equity. So the large infrastructure investment banks are the sort of ones who can provide the long-term 20-30 year lifespan sort of investment profiles. That's where I think we need to go, and that's both the local authorities' responsibility but also us in the charging sector to provide kit that lasts a long period of time. So the reason we're able to fund our projects using the big infrastructure investment banks is because the kit lasts for such a long period of time. We're the only ones in the business who can do that with infrastructure finance. Most of the others are using private equity. Problem with private equity obviously is that you need a return far more quickly, and therefore the consumer ends up paying.
Thank you. I have a question from Luke, but I think actually some of this you may have not answered in your presentation, but it'll be partially answered by completing the survey when I follow up with everybody. But what do you think is currently the biggest barrier in people's minds to adoption of electric cars? Is it price point, availability of charging points, or generally anxiety about a major change?
I don't know the specific answer to that. I think there's a few ways you can interpret it. Well, maybe I'd reframe it. So when we think about the barriers to adoption, we talk about three things really. One is the availability of the vehicles. So that is actually how many vehicles are there, what range, as in what's their performance, is the supply of the vehicles enough? So not only just the number of vehicles that you can buy in terms of the models, but are you able to get enough of them? So there's big wait times at the moment for them. And then is the price point achievable? The price point seems to be changing dramatically at the moment. And there are also, I think there's a wider acknowledgement now that not everyone buys a new car. A lot of them have leases, and some of the lease deals are pretty phenomenal at the moment. The second part is around the supply of infrastructure, and I think we've talked a little bit about that, and we're trying to solve that. And then the third part, which is often overlooked, is education. So unfortunately, there is a huge amount of conflicting information out in the market, some of it patently wrong, around the environmental performance of EVs, that's been debunked. But often, unfortunately, as we all know, the way that the news reporting cycle goes is it means that the first bit of news that gets out gets the attention, and then if it's debunked, it's less interesting to debunk it. So that's happened a few times recently. So again, when we talk to government, we're advising pretty heavily that they need to step in and help from an education perspective. The reason I say that is because most people's knowledge of EV is about 2 years old relative to where it is today. So if you look at ZapMap, for example, and you see the number of charging points and they're spread across the UK, there are quite a lot and they're growing relatively quickly. So it's not enough, but there are more probably than people think. The other part is people think that the average EV does 100 miles in terms of charge, and actually most of the cars that you're able to buy on the market now are doing 250 miles on a single charge. So the cars have moved on dramatically in the last few years, and equally the price point of those, again, most people don't sort of understand. So I think the education piece is really important, which is why our team really focuses on the outreach campaigns when we go and deploy.
I would also add the second-hand car market to that, Chris. I think once that expands, both my vehicles that you saw in my presentation were bought second-hand. And I think as more second-hand cars come into the market, as these leases end and they get into new cars, then we'll see, you know, the transition rates increase.
Agreed.
That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
I was going to say, just touching on some of the sort of misinformation that's put out there. There was talk of EVs taking about it would take about 8 years or 50,000 miles before it becomes before it sort of pays back on carbon that's taken to create the vehicle, and that was put out in all the media saying it's about 50,000 miles, 8 years. But in reality, that's about 8 to 16,000 miles before you get that sort of payoff and return on that as well. So there is, and understandably, people put out misinformation to sort of further their ends. But I think if you look at the actual research and on that, a lot of that's been debunked as well. But yeah, I think for me, it's the education, just sort of understanding that it is a new technology. But I think when people actually look into it for themselves, or actually take a test drive in an EV, you see how it works, how you'd live with it, how in many ways it's much more convenient in terms of going to somewhere to fill up it in traditional fuel as well. So yeah, just the education, just learning about it and just trying it, I think is the best way to get used to it and be able to actually adopt it. And for mainstream adoption, that's what we're going to need.
We also, sorry to butt in as well, so I think we'll also, it's living with that degree of uncertainty, it's change, it's something different, which sometimes is tough to handle.
It's an interesting concept, actually. So it is a bit of a mindset switch, I imagine. You go to a friend's house for dinner for the evening. You're then borrowing potentially their electricity if you or staying with a friend for the weekend, as an example.
You are, but the interesting thing is though. So I have this with my parents if I ever go and stay with my car. And in reality, to charge the full car at their house is literally from zero would be under £10. So I just give them 10 quid when I go and charge up. So the costs are pretty minimal. What I think is really interesting about what you said though is that it's those conversations with your neighbours and your friends which will get this to change. So we've realised pretty quickly that us selling EV doesn't work. We can sell EV charging infrastructure, but we aren't the right people to sell EV. It's your neighbour and your friend that is the right person to sell EV to you because you trust them. We might be honest and transparent and ethically driven business people, but we're still not people you trust. Whereas your neighbour you do. So what we've tried to do is where we go and deploy our chargers, we do outreach and education campaigns, and then we also do lease vehicle trials, all those sort of different things to try and get vehicles out into the community so that people can actually test them and make their own decision on them rather than us sort of preaching to them. So I think those sort of conversations that you've described around the dinner table are really important.
That's useful. Martin, maybe you could answer this one. So Lee Dugdale from OneFix has asked, how easy is it to charge abroad? And you mentioned you drove down through France. If you're on holiday, if you're taking your car abroad with you.
I don't want to be, I know I've got a Tesla and I don't want to, be pushing one brand above another brand. But, there's a reason which people don't really understand. There's a reason why they're so expensive, and there's a reason why maybe they're more expensive than a comparable car, which may have more features, but you are literally paying for the infrastructure. As I said, because I have a 2014 Model S, at that time, they were trying to encourage people to obviously take up these electric vehicles when they weren't even half as popular as they were now. So when that car was produced, it came with a lifetime guarantee that you can charge that car up at any supercharger, wherever, whether that's in England, whether that's abroad, for free. So that is a major asset, and I relate it to Trigger's broom, if anyone knows the Fools and Horses analogy. He had that many handles and that many heads, but it was still the same broom. So it doesn't matter if I get a new battery, I get new things in the car, as long as that's why I believe, and I firmly believe, that my car will be one of the first classic electric cars in how many, 20 or 30 or 50 years, whenever, because it will still be free electricity, free supercharging. So my experience of charging, was great, but I had, as I said, the support of the Tesla superchargers. Obviously had to do a bit of research. So I knew the holiday camp we were staying at just outside Biarritz had chargers. So as I say, we just have to think differently and do different things. We are not used to planning when it comes to
it's also worth, sorry to Martin, it's also worthwhile saying that, I mean, I know you're a huge fan of Tesla and I understand why you are, but in the last 2 years as well, the EU has done a phenomenal job in encouraging the deployment of not very many of I think they've got the same challenge that we have here. The slow fast network hasn't been deployed, but the ultra rapid network across the EU has been scaled dramatically, particularly in France and Western Europe. So you can drive to most motorway service stations in France now, and you'll see rapids and ultra rapid charging points available. So I think they're not still quite where Tesla was, or to where Tesla is, but they're doing a good game in catching up.
That's wonderful. I'm very aware that we are running very close to time. So I'll take a last question. So Craig Atkins, what is the lifespan of currently deployed chargers? Why is the lifespan of currently deployed chargers so short at present? Are you able to support vehicle to grid exporting through your infrastructure?
So we, in the on-street space, no, we don't do vehicle to grid at the moment. I can't really talk any more about what we're doing in that space right now because there's some innovation and patent stuff on that. We don't think vehicle to grid on street necessarily works because you have such a turnover of different customers coming in and plugging in that it's not quite, it doesn't work quite in the same way that home scenarios would for vehicle to grid. I think there is a role to play for battery storage, though, acting to support the grid and equally acting to support the consumer charging their cars on street in the residential setting, though. So that's something we are looking at. In terms of why they last for such a short period of time, it's the failure rates of the componentry that's in them. So for a start, there's the components that are inside the charging points that seem to have a low performance rate, and it's there relatively early in the development cycle. And then it's finally that part that I touched on right at the start of my slides around the separation of the socket from the charger. So we had a instance where when we first started talking to Prologis, we turned up to one of their sites and they had I think it was a Shell New Motion charging point there. Great bit of kit, really, really competent bit of charging infrastructure. Problem was the day before a lorry had bumped into it. So it was completely smashed and it was going to cost £4,000 to go and put a new one in its place. Quite happily, the Prologis's UK CEO said, of course, if this was a connected curb charging point, you'd just be replacing the socket. So that is one of the reasons why in 7 years or 10 years, it's likely that they're going to get hit, they're going to get damaged or vandalized. So if you're only replacing the socket, you massively increase your uptime in it. And then it's also just around trying to, as we've gone through every single component that's in the system, and we've gone for high cycle bits of kit so that we know they have that performance rating to them.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you'll extend your thanks. I will pass any outstanding questions over to the Connected Kerb team. Just time for me to wrap up. You've had that slide up for a while now, so upcoming events, MPs roundtables, get in touch with your account manager or me directly. You've all got my contact details. And then we have a mental health webinar due next, please, John. Or I can actually play, can't I? Look, my own technology. And that's on the 28th of April. It just remains for me to thank Martin, Giles and Chris for your very valuable time this morning. I could actually sit and listen to this all day for sure. I hope it was useful. Tick some boxes for the engineers in the room, the accountants, our property people in the room. My colleague John hopefully is able to record the questions for me. Guys from Connected Kerb, go on.
Sorry, could I just say, so on our last slide, it had some of our contact details. I'm just looking through some of the questions, and there's been a few requests for our details. We'd be delighted to have conversations with any of you, and maybe our slides could be shared with this group, because our details are on there. So
Sure.
Very chat with any of you.
That's great. Yes, and I'll be following up with all the delegates, or their relevant account managers will do anyway, to get a bit of feedback, pass on your survey, and see what answers we can get for you to help with your data collection, and we'll put you all in touch for sure. Thank you for your time, guys. Thank you to my lovely audience. I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.